Welcome to BrowserStack Talks, the podcast that turns testing pain points into playbooks. I'm your host, David, and today we're going to be diving into the topic that's on everyone's mind: the role of the human tester in the age of artificial intelligence. Can a machine truly replace the human touch? To help us navigate this fascinating subject, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dan Makarov, a renowned expert in the software development and testing space. Dan, please introduce yourself to the public.
Hi, David. First of all, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. And secondly, yes, as you've mentioned, I'm Dan. I've been a product manager for most of my career, or I've been in product management for most of my career. I've been at Google, then BCG, as in Boston Consulting Group, specifically their arm that's building startups for big companies. And then I've co-founded a company called Birdie's Bug that allows you to report and fix issues like software bugs quicker. And I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. And then we were acquired by BrowserStack, which brings me to BrowserStack, where I'm working on one of the products that's called the Testing Toolkit. And we're trying to make it easier for manual testers to test and trying to remove the repetitive tasks, including using AI to do that.
Amazing. So, since we've started with kind of the topic of humans in the age of AI space, let's start with the biggest question. Will AI-powered tools automating so many tasks actually just replace manual testing, or is it going to augment it?
I don't think it will replace manual testing, at least in the next X years. Let's say it's maybe 10 years. That's a question that, even when we had our own company that I mentioned, Birdie's Bug, and we were fundraising, investors were asking us these questions. What's the vision, and wouldn't AI replace the need for your tool? And that was maybe 5 years ago, and here we are still here today, and manual testing has not been replaced. I think it will change over time, meaning that the manual testing job will evolve, but I don't think in the next, let's say, 10 to 15 years it will be completely replaced. But it will be very different. The analogy that I would use maybe is that if you think about, let's say, farming, right? At the beginning, you have farmers who do have a lot of manual tasks, right? Like you need to seed, you need to harvest, and so on, and that takes a lot of hands. And over time, these manual tasks get replaced by machinery, for example, and now also AI, for example, also helps in farming. But it's not like the farmers went away. So I think it could be very similar, and probably the work of a tester will require more skills over time, but it will be there.
Yeah. So that reminds me of so a couple of weeks ago, I was in South Africa for events, and that BrowserStack was sponsoring, and a similar question had come up in the panel, and something you said there just kind of triggered the thought, was that the panel was always telling people it's not going to change, like get rid of testers. It's definitely not going to do that, but AI, people who don't understand the underlying craft in the age of AI are likely to be those people to be replaced, but the people who understand what it takes to kind of think critically, those things, and then slowly but surely augment their job with AI, those people we probably want are going to be staying around. So I like your farmer's analogy, because I think that fits in quite nicely, because we don't have as many hands on a farm, but the people who understand the tooling still have their farms, right? And they
absolutely. And it requires much more, even if we speak about farmers, it's not just that I need to know how the crops grow. I need to be able to fix the tractor. I need to know how software works, how it connects to the tractor, and so on. So it's I think it hits every industry, that everybody will over time need to be more skilled. I think one analogy to use would be that I think AI is great at averaging, as in like AI gives you an average answer most of the time. So let's say if I'm writing music, so like I'm a composer, will a good composer be better than AI? Absolutely. Will AI be a better composer than like me, a person with no musical background? Absolutely, right? So I think like even in manual testing, it's similar that it can beat like a lower qualified tester, but it cannot beat a highly qualified tester.
Okay. And so, like, in the kind of the age of AI and AI, like vibe coding as kind of I like to say, I kind of feel old every time I say vibe coding. Right, it always it feels like it's this generational thing, but like there's a lot more vibe coding now. We're having more products coming to market, and the kind of the thing that I kind of worry about, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is like, are we still getting AI to solve those problems, or are we like, could you like do a bit of a deeper dive into like how you see the real people getting into like those spaces where we've got these products coming to market, but is quality actually improving or is it dropping, and how
Yeah.
do we fix that?
I have an ongoing argument with one of my friends on this. So his point of view is that vibe coding will kill a lot of SaaS because you will be able to build a tool internally at, like you pay for it once and then you don't need to pay an ongoing subscription. I'm of a different opinion because I think there's a lot of curation going on. So let's say I want to build an applicant tracking system, right? Like if I'm in HR or like a recruiter, and I have an applicant tracking system. First of all, it's a massive piece of code, and I'm not sure like you can easily vibe code it. First of all, and secondly, you're not gonna get as much usability, for example, as a product that was delivered by professionals.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you can cook everything yourself, right from scratch, but you will probably buy yogurt instead of making it, right? Like, can you make yogurt? Like, yes, you can. Can you make sour cream? Yes, you can, but you will probably buy it. And I think it's similar with like vibe coding in general. So first of all, I don't think it will replace SaaS. It will. It sounds like it will dramatically increase the number of lines of code that exist in the world because A, it produces a lot of code, and B, this code is of bad quality. And so that's one trend, I think. And then the other trend is that, of course, like AI will help test a lot of this functionality as well, and is going to be like opposing forces. So, like on the one hand, we have an increasing number of code that needs to be tested, and then on the other hand, we have an increasing ability of AI to test that code. So, like the demand for, let's say, manual testing is going to go down. But which of these trends will win? That to me is unclear. I think in the news you would mostly hear that manual testing is going to be replaced, but I think that's mostly because it's a catchy headline, and that like vibe coding will replace like manual testing or like testing in general. I'm not sure that that would be the case. And then like we all know that vibe coded apps are not really scalable, at least at the moment. But again, it's we're now sitting in 2025, and then maybe by 2030 or 35, the vibe coding apps are so good at testing and so good at writing clean code that we cannot even imagine it today that it will be different. But nonetheless, I think it will. So far, it looks like it will increase the demand for testing. And also, by the way, I think that there is a difference between manual testing job, like a job of a manual tester, and manual testing. And I think a lot of the time we tend to confuse, and then we say, like it gets scary that manual testers will go away. Maybe, but manual testing is not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah.
Partly because it's done not just by testers themselves, but product managers do some manual testing, developers do their own manual testing before the code goes to staging and so on. So I think we need to differentiate between those two as well.
Yeah, I think that's quite correct. It's the human-centric thinking that tends to come through it, right? So like you can write automation that will do the tasks, and if there's a bug, it'll find it. But for it to have complete like vision, if we think of like products like Percy, right? The vision needs to kind of happen asynchronous to the test, and it needs to catch up because the technology is not where people would like it, like in those super fast feedback loops. It's fast, don't get me wrong, but it's not something you can run locally and go, yeah, that's fast, right? Or sub-second tests, and it's the same with kind of, if you try to log into a page and it takes a little bit longer, right? You create these guards in your test to make sure it passes so that you can log in. But in human-centric intuition really kicks in. You go, actually, that shouldn't take 20 seconds to get from the login page in, right? But in an automated test, you're like, awesome, I'm in, right? And I think that's kind of what you're going for, isn't it? It's that explore it, like manual tester versus manual testing.
Yeah. Like to your point, I think it's not just there's several parts to it. So there's human, as in we have some common understanding as humans of how something should behave. Like, for example, login taking 20 seconds. People would say that this is abnormal. But also, like a closer circle is how this behaves within a company. So, like one thing that I don't think will be solved with AI in the near future, especially in enterprises, because enterprises keep their data very secure. Like you won't be able to connect an AI to every part of your day-to-day operation. So it's not like it's going to be connected to Confluence and then it's going to be connected to your Zoom call where you discuss the design brief, for example, for a certain feature. And there is so much in the ether, right? Like that's not documented anywhere. Like you've spoken to somebody over the coffee, and you know that, for example, like a product has been renamed. So you're going and testing this, and you're like, oh, we forgot to rename this button, for example, and it's not in the task brief. It's not something that AI can pick up, and I think like a lot of the human aspects are there because of that, like because of these human-to-human interactions that we don't even notice most of the time.
Yeah. So I think the way I see it is that the manual exploratory testers, they're going to move from pure execution to trying to be a bit more strategic in thinking how absolutely. Testing is going to happen, right? Yeah. And then they'll want to find tools that allow them to augment that, right? So you like testing toolkit, you can just go, let me kind of raise this bug, do this, do that, right? Like you've got all these things. And so do you see, like, that's how I see it, but like, do you see a lot more strategic movement that way for testers?
Yes. It's possibly one of the greatest things that happened to manual testing. So again, I would think of it in two lenses. One is test automation versus automating testing. Right, so like test automation is like you write a script and then the script gets executed. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. And then test automation is like, how do I make my manual testing quicker? And that can come in a variety of ways. Like, I don't know, you have a tool that's saying, hey, why don't you test this weird email in the input field? Why don't you test like a negative number in this input field, and so on? That's one thing. And that frees up a lot of your time, hopefully, over time to do more strategic things. And that's also what I mentioned, that the skills going into testing will be not just different, but I think you will need to be way more skillful, and you'll need to think about way more things, which is great because like we don't want anybody to doing like repetitive work of clicking buttons and just doing the same test over and over again, because that's I don't think that's even in the human nature, and like the more thinking we can do it in the manual testing or any job for that matter, the better it is. And yes, you need to be more strategic, not just in let's say writing test cases or prioritizing test cases, but also in applying, since we're talking about AI, to applying AI and sort of putting guardrails first of all for AI, and also guiding this in the right direction, so it's doing the right testing for your tool. And that's not just it's not going to be just the job of a tester. I think that will also require quite a bit of cooperation with like engineering, product managers, and designers, and hopefully a lot more understanding from the end user.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I think kind of for me, being able to like back when I was having to do this, and this was a long time ago, was trying to create like test cases, and like you got to think through it, and then you got to write down all the steps, right? Like there's a lot of busy work, and I think to me, AI replacing that section where I can go, hey, I just want to review this because I can. To me, it's like editing a document versus writing the document from scratch, right? Editing's way easier than writing it from scratch. And I see that type of space being like taken over because that's busy work, right? Or kind of filling in reports or things like that, where the human mind to me is incredibly creative and so smart, and we should allow that creativity to come out because testers are incredibly creative because they will break applications in amazing ways, right? Or find
not as amazing as end users. So end users will still find a way, like a novel way to break the application. But
yeah, no, and I think that's really good. So like, how can manual testers, like, as they start using this creativity and like their deep knowledge of the product, right? Because testers have to be able to navigate end users' way of thinking and the developer's way of thinking, right? And marry those two up. How do you think we can move through that space, like through tooling or kind of things that you know are coming out, like ways that we can improve that space to allow them to expand that again?
It's not just tooling, first of all. Like on the tooling aspect, tool literacy, of course, never hurt anybody, and in just knowing what different tools allow you to achieve. On a side note, it looks like it will be some consolidation among tools. Like we've spoken to a number of testers, and there's a lot of fragmentation because there are some smaller tools, some bigger testing platforms, and so on, and we looked specifically at extensions because, I'm working on an extension, and like we saw that many people have like 7 different extensions for different use cases from different providers, obviously paying, for them separately. So that there's this part that it looks like there will be some consolidation on the market in general. That's one thing. That's on the tooling perspective. And then in general on the navigation perspective, I think one thing that's not happening as often as I would like maybe at the moment is testers speaking to end users. So it's mostly done by product managers or like user researchers / designers. Obviously CEOs of company do this and so on. But for testers, that's not often the case. And a lot of the time you see this by, like a tester suggesting something, but that you've spoken to, let's say, 10 users, and that's not the expectation, for example. So I think it's whatever time is freed up by using tools and AI and simplifying workflows can be taken into user research. And it doesn't need to be even like talking to users really, but even going through like analytics and so on. So like almost stepping on product manager's toes, go through analytics and understanding like the user flows on the website or product. That would already, I think, be a huge help, and again, not something that AI can replace, and that this is definitely a human touch and like human understanding of how to translate the data, because the data is always there. There's never not enough data, I would say. Well, almost never not enough data. Usually the problem is there's too much data, and like nobody has time to properly take a look at it. So my wish is that we'll be in a world where testers do have time for that.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, I think kind of the more we can free up, the better we can do that. One of the things you said there that I thought was quite interesting, and kind of my understanding of how corporate IT generally works, this must be quite frustrating, but you mentioned that there's a lot of like juggling of multiple tools in the browser just to do like kind of get their job done, and you can see consolidation. That must be like a huge, like, firstly from a enterprise point of view, like when these things roll out, like in my experience, I'd be able to install the extensions myself to a point, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that all my peers have the same tools or doing the same job, right? Like that must be, like, as a product manager, you must see like a lot of frustration from people like that.
There are two, like, especially if you think about enterprise, there are two things that we see all the time, like in user research. One is that, as you mentioned, at enterprise, it's not easy to install an extension. It comes in a couple of ways. Some browsers are just locked from installing third-party extensions that are not approved. And and this is like a hard limitation, let's say, within the enterprise. And then it takes like 6 months to approve a new extension. And then, of course, like smaller players have a disadvantage here because it's a lot less likely that somebody will advocate and like push through all of the security hurdles to get this extension approved. Then there's a soft limitation, meaning that the use of third-party extensions is not allowed. It's not enforced. But then people are like, well, do I want to risk my job for installing a tool that will, like marginally increase my productivity? And when you think about 7 tools like this, it becomes even trickier. And then what was the other part? We said enterprise, the approval process.
Yeah, just getting them on, because like
and juggling,
the inconsistency between peers, right? Like
Right. Yes, exactly. That was another point. That was another point that we heard in the user research, that especially when onboarding new people, and especially if those are more junior people, like how do you ensure that everybody is aware of all of the toolage, let's say, that's being used in the company, and how do you make sure that the same, let's say, profiles are used? In our case, like, as you know, BrowserStack has the product called Live, and that's for cross-browser testing. Or cross-device testing in general. And we've had a user that had a very relevant, let's say, quote to this topic. They have a use case where they test on the latest devices. So let's say the iPhone, they test on iPhone 15, so some MacBook, and maybe Galaxy S22. And the head of testing, head of QA, wants to ensure that everybody is testing on those devices. But the new devices come out. So let's say iPhone 17 comes out. So she wants to, for all of her team to be able to know that, the device came out, and now we're testing on this device. So she wanted to have this sync within the team, that like, here's the profile that we're testing on, and we're testing iPhone 17, Galaxy S22, and like a MacBook side by side. And that she wanted to have pushed to all of her team members. So, I mean, this is also something that we're going to be working on, but that's a definitely valid use case.
Yeah, no, I can see that, especially because like Live is really good when you want kind of, because there's intricacies. I worked on Firefox for years, right? And I can tell you, just because you put it in a smaller like in say Chrome, for example, Chrome will act the same as on kind of a Google device. You're like, it doesn't really, for the most part, maybe yes, whatever, but there are also times where you just want like 80% is good enough, right? And then it's like, then I can kind of see these things side by side, and that becomes incredibly valuable, right? And having the tooling to do that, not necessarily pushing it onto Live or
it's the tooling and the knowledge of these tools, because not everybody at the same company is equally knowledgeable or equally curious, for example, and then you want everybody to be aware of all of the tools that can save time. Or, by the way, we're talking a lot about saving time, like especially in the AI, but rarely do we talk about increasing quality, like finding more issues, for example, or writing or like making sure that there are test cases that are there that otherwise people would have forgotten about, right? And I think like it was an adjacent team that's working on this, so that they have this test case generation agent, and I think a lot of the value of this is not just that it can create a bunch of test cases automatically for you, but that it can create the test cases that you might have forgotten about. And I think AI in general is quite good at it. Like even whenever I use like Gemini or ChatGPT, there are things that you just forget to think about. And then, like, yes, as I mentioned before, it gives you kind of like an average answer a lot of the time. But like sometimes it highlights like, oh, actually I didn't think about X. And that proof is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, when I mean time, and I should have clarified this at the beginning, to me time is like, if you have more time, you can kind of focus on other things. So like I've spent a lot of time in the test automation space, and the more test automation you do, the more time you free up to do other tasks, right?
Yeah.
It's a pay it forward system, right? And
yeah, so, it's not like you go home earlier because you've automated something. I think that's a lot of the time why people are afraid of automation, is that like, oh, I will be automated out of my job, and it's not always that. Yeah. In fact, most of the time it's not that. Like it means that you now have two more things to do that otherwise because there's always more to do than you have time for. So like hopefully by automating some things we would get to do everything that's on our list.
Yeah. So like I early on in my career, I was doing kind of Selenium was brand new. I was setting this up in a startup. And I was like getting everything working. I was getting everything stable. Like everything was just working really well. And I kind of joked with my manager, who was the CTO. Right, it's a startup, so like of course I reported directly into the CTO. And I said, if I do all this, can I go play golf more often? And he's like, of course, right? As long as everything's being done, you can do whatever you want. Right? Little did I know, like I it was an off the cuff, it was flippant, and I knew it wasn't going to be true, but like I thought I'd try it, and because he said yes, I was like, oh, okay. But obviously,
where's the but? Yes.
Yeah, he knew more than I did, obviously, as a CTO, and I was fairly young in my career, and he was like, so I got all those things, and then it was like, there's new features, and there's new this, right? Because we opened up the space to have a safety net to kind of explore more, to kind of push the boundaries of where we wanted to be, to get more customers, to keep things rolling, right? Like every company does. And so that's where, like, to me, like the time should give us creativity, the space. We can do amazing things. And we should be using that, because it's always a pay it forward, right? A number of automators will tell you, I don't have time to do automation because I've got so much manual testing to do, right? And Marit, she's always kind of been this big advocate of automation and exploratory testing is a circle, right? The more you automate, that gives you the freedom to do exploratory testing, to figure out what's the most important thing to do, to then automate that, and then you just keep going. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I recently saw a number on the market size for manual and automation testing, and it's like almost exact 50-50 split. So that works really well with what you said, is that like 50% of time, let's say I'm spending on automation. I mean, like market size is not directly correlating with the time spent, but like roughly I'm spending 50% of my time or money on automation and 50% on manual testing.
Yeah.
And like even with the automation, I think it's like only like even in bigger companies. And again, like bigger companies have stable products, stable code, and so on. So like we're even excluding startups. there's like 20% test coverage, something like this. So it's not that like automation is going to take over, and you're not going to automate every. I think it was one of the car manufacturers. I think it was Tesla. And the idea was that, oh, we're going to automate the entire assembly line. And I think they did that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Tesla. And then they said, well, actually, it's cheaper to keep people, to keep like humans in some of the places on the assembly line, because whenever you change something, it's way cheaper to retrain a person, and because people are more adaptable, than to get the new machinery, like install it, configure it, and so on. I guess you also have less downtime.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just in software that these challenges arise, but also like in hardware and traditional.
Yeah, I prefer the Toyota method when it comes to this. Are you aware of the Toyota method?
No.
So Toyota have this kind of great, like they created this thing where they try to encourage people to be always trying to improve their productivity, right? Because if they improve their productivity, the company improves their productivity.
Wins, yeah.
But it could be as little as moving your, because they have mobile workstations. If I move my mobile workstation an inch closer to me, or 2.5 centimeters, depending on which part of the world you're from, right, doesn't mean I don't need to stretch. I can easily handle the things and I can prove it, right? And it's those type of things where, like, if one person does it, then you can replicate it through. And so theirs is always about these small incremental changes constantly improves everything. So it's like, if I improve it by 1% every day, eventually in 100 days, hopefully I'll be 100% more productive than I am today, right?
Yeah.
Type of thing.
That's, I think, by the way, like speaking of AI, many people expect a step change or like a revolutionary change in whether it's testing, whether it's software engineering. But it's not always the case, and it doesn't necessarily need to be that one thing changes your productivity and like gives you 2x better outcome. But it can also be 10 things that each improve, 10% here and there, and then cumulatively you'll also get there. It's really boring in terms of like, again, like it's not going to catch the news headlines because it's not a breaking change. But at the end of the day, I think we'll almost unexpectedly become more productive, like over the course of, let's say, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, definitely. Before we kind of go into our quickfire round, I'm just going to say something you said there I think is really important. And it's something I have advocated for, is that there are times where you actually want the boring technology, because boring tends to mean stable. It means easier to use because it's there. Where newer, shinier, dopamine-driven development, as Simon Stewart, the WebDriver creator, likes to call it, can create other vast problems. And sometimes boring is actually quite good and useful.
Yes, very much so.
Right. So we're going to head into our quickfire round. So Dan, the quickfire round is I get to ask you one question. You need to give me the first thing that comes to mind as quickly as possible. If it's an interesting answer, I might deep dive into it. But for the most part, we're just going to try to keep it really quick.
Got it.
And after that, we will then close up and say goodbye to everyone. So, favorite testing tool you've used this year?
I'm biased. It's obviously the testing toolkit that I'm working on. I cannot recommend anything else other than testing toolkit. So that was an easy one.
Book every tester should read in 2025.
I don't think it's a book, to be honest. I think like where we are, the books cannot catch up. Like basically, so by the time you publish a book and go through, like especially in AI, everything will have changed 3 times. So I think it's not a book. I think it's staying on the pulse of the news, trying sort of, well, not every tool that comes out, but every type of tool maybe that comes out, or like checking if there are any any courses that either the company sponsors or something like this. But yes, like I said, I would say that it's not a book.
Okay. Cool. Underrated testing skill that you know.
As I mentioned, it's user interviews or customer discovery. Way underrated. Testers need it just as much as PMs, designers, and everyone else.
If you went in the software world as a product manager, kind of things like that, what career would you pursue now?
I would open up a burger place. I mean, it's pretty far from. Well, as a millennial, first of all, I need to do something offline, right? Like I need to to go through my mid. I mean, it's not yet midlife, but to go through my mid-30s crisis. People do marathons or cycling, so I would go through it in a burger place. But I think it has a lot to do with product management actually, and like positioning and like market research and so on. So like to carve out the right niche and to optimize the processes and so on. But mostly, I think it's like something that you miss a lot, that I miss a lot in software, is that you rarely get to see people interacting with something you've built, and like you don't get this the emotions or like. I mean, the gratitude if you build something cool is like, yes, sure. Like once in a while, you get customer interviews, and then you see the when the eyes light up and people like what they see. But I think in the real world, like I kind of miss the real world sort of connection and getting to talk to people not on a Zoom call, but in real life.
Yeah. I've got to say that's one of the key things why I went into open source and have managed to try to stay in the open source space for so long, and I get to do the developer advocacy because like I write the code and then I ship it, and then people come up to me and go, hey, this is amazing, I've been able to do this and this and this with what you've done. It's like, wow, I never even thought of that as a use case. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, one, it's counter to what I said, but when we built Birdie's bug that I mentioned previously, a friend of mine was on a vacation, I think, in Thailand, and he met like a couple, and they were, I think, like a product manager maybe and like a software developer. And somehow they figured out that they were also using Birdie's bug, and he knew me like as a co-founder, and it was so amazing when you have a person in Thailand like randomly meeting your users, and they say they like the product, and I was like, this is peak satisfaction for I think like a product manager or founder in this case.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Awesome. So Dan, thank you for coming on today. I think this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. So thank you for joining us and giving us your unique perceptiveness. Sorry. If there was, where can people see what you're doing more of? How can they follow you? Things like that.
Yeah, great question. I think you can see my work, first of all, if you Google just for testing toolkit, and then you'll find the extension that we're working on, and you'll see all the developments there. If you're interested in in what I have to say, you can also follow me on LinkedIn. It's Dan Makarov, and then if you search at BrowserStack, I think I'm the only Dan Makarov at BrowserStack, so it's going to be easy to find. And yeah, I mean that's about it in terms of my online presence. So yeah, feel free to follow and see what we're up to.
Awesome. And then before I give down the final word to everyone who's listening, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in. If you're looking to turn your testing pain points into playbooks, make sure to subscribe and catch the next BrowserStack Talks episode. It'll be coming up soon. So Dan, any parting words?
Yes, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And secondly, I mean, this is obvious that we're living in quite an interesting time period. I think that the next few years might be scary in terms of like what's coming, because I think people don't like change in general, and then like averse to change. But in the end, I think we'll all come out sort of stronger, better. I mean, the software will be better, the experience will be better, and hopefully our workflows will also be better. So I think the main takeaway, and it doesn't come down to AI. It's applicable for any time frame. That you always need to learn new skills. You need to reinvent yourself, and then you need to see how these skills can land you a job, can improve your career, and hopefully make your life better as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, David.